Okay, welcome to Committee of the Whole. It is June 17th, 6 p.m. Andy, please call the roll.
Cobb.
Here.
Kuda.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Larson. Here. Russell. Posh.
Here. The first thing on our agenda is an ARPA update with Guidehouse. Can I see? Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
You guys can hear us fine?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, actually very well.
Oh, wonderful.
Somebody just
My name is Rebecca Fidel.
turn it over to you.
I'm a senior consultant with Guidehouse Public and State and Local Government Sector. A little about me, and because I think this is the first time I've met some of you. So I have about 10 years experience working in the public sector. Before joining Guidehouse, I received my law degree, and I worked in various legislative affair positions at state level. So I'm also born and raised in Cleveland Heights. My parents still live in Cleveland Heights. Super, we call ourselves Heightsers. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but we call ourselves Heightsers. So really excited. I was really excited to join this project, and I've been really excited about continuing to work on it because it's personal to me. So I'm happy to be here. I don't have much of a presentation per se, but I do have time to answer any questions and update as far as where we're at. At this moment, I believe we've gotten all but 2 contracts out. And we're just kind of at that phase where we are still talking to nonprofits and preparing for upcoming TA sessions. Those are technical assistance sessions where we'll work directly with the nonprofits to have discussions of what's going on with their project, what expenses are they looking at, make sure that we're all in the same line of understanding, and make sure that as they're going forward, we stay in compliance on a federal level. So that's where we're at right now. I believe we start our first sessions next week.
Very good. I'll turn it over to my fellow council members for questions. Councilman Petrus.
Thank you. Hi, Rebecca. Could you share an update with us on those groups that needed some additional research?
Additional research in regards to what?
I think that we were told that, for example, Start Right and Future Heights, we needed to do some additional research before we could write contracts with them on housing-related projects.
2 contracts I know that aren't out right now. The reason for that is we're working on the scope of work. And the nonprofits themselves, we need some time to get with them. They don't have the capacity to fill out paperwork through email. They need kind of more of a helping hand. And so we need the time to schedule that.
Is that the same 2?
Well, to my knowledge, there's only 2 contracts not out. So
my recollection was that we needed to do some additional research, some additional due diligence on projects for Start Right and Future Heights. They had housing-related projects, and so we were told that we would get more information in June. Those groups in particular recently told me that they didn't hear much until just this afternoon when they were invited to a meeting on the 28th to talk about this with the city. Director Hanna, do you happen to know?
I don't.
Okay.
Those, Chris Heltzel, Assistant Director of Law, may be able to shed some light on that, but those 2 organizations, I think are going to be treated in a way, or are going to be categorized in a way that's different. Start Right and Future Heights.
Yes.
Are going to be sort of funded from revenue replacement dollars is the current working plan. Beyond that, a meeting on the 28th, are you aware of something having been scheduled?
Is that the Thursday? Next Thursday?
That would be a Friday. 28th.
Potentially.
So I'm not aware of a meeting on the 28th, but I was out of the office until a couple hours, so it's possible I missed something.
Okay.
I don't have a meeting for the 28th specifically. I mean, if I had more context on what meeting they were asking about or who specifically had mentioned the meeting, I might be able to figure out what date they meant, but I don't have anything for the 28th.
And Councilman, this was, the meeting on the 28th is something that you heard about from
From
Or
them,
both of
from
these?
Start Right and from Future Heights.
Okay.
They told me that they received an email today asking if they would be available to meet with our city leaders on the 28th.
So. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Gail Larson. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
All of the contracts that we received yesterday from President Kuda were marked draft. So I'm interested in what next steps are going to happen for these nonprofits. Who got the drafts?
So draft is really more procedural. We say draft because it's not the final edit, and so giving both parties and all parties involved, including council and the nonprofits, the opportunity to provide feedback, allow administration to provide feedback. So until we get the final, like, yes, this is the final version, we like, because then we number the drafts as well. It helps us keep track. So it's more of a internal procedure reason that it was labeled draft.
One follow-up question to that. So will our law department be tweaking the drafts in coordination with the nonprofit that has that specific contract? So
Yeah, so those discussions will be with the law department, right?
Okay.
What is able to be discussed, what isn't able to be adjusted, those kind of things. So for example, they may be like, oh, we don't like this word. We may be able to work on that, right? But the money is the money. We can't adjust that. So there are some things in the contract, obviously, that we're allowing room for feedback on, and some things not. That will be with the law department, yes.
thank you.
Well, and Mr. President, if I might,
Yeah, please.
to the councilwoman's question, Chris sent those contracts out on Friday. We stamped them, draft in the law department. They were prepared in the law department. So there may be pushback or inquiries from the nonprofits. I'm not aware that we've received any in the last 48 to 72 hours.
I've received a few, and I've spoken to a couple of the nonprofit heads who have called, and
Great, thank you.
they've had some questions, but we've been able to address everything so far.
Thank you. So they know how to get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
All right.
And that was in the transmittal email. And our expectation is that questions that come up will be of a type that can be responded to between now and, sort of next Monday, so that potentially council can be in a position to act yet within June.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca, do you happen to know when the application for the small business assistance will become available?
Become available to whom?
For small businesses so that they can apply for the assistance, yes.
For the small businesses, I do not have a date on that. I wouldn't be able to give you a concrete date on that if I did. I haven't been able to make that determination on a concrete
So
date.
I guess just more generally speaking, I think that it would be really good for us to put together a timeline so that all the different stakeholders, council members, small businesses, other know what to expect. I think that most people would recognize that it's been pretty difficult getting things out to the or to the nonprofits, and they applied a year ago, and we're just, working on the contracts now. We have just 6 months for these small businesses, so hopefully we can get at least a timeline that overviews that for us.
Yeah, we have an internal timeline. Next week, we will be, while working with the nonprofits, we're discussing and presenting drafts to the city. We're having discussions with the city administration around small businesses as well as city projects. So those are all things we are managing, and internally we have plans to meet and discuss. But your ask was specifically when the businesses will be able to apply. I don't have a timeline for that yet. Additionally, this process for the small business grant will be much smoother as it's being handled in the appropriate order, process, and procedure. Because we're kind of able to come in, present those applications, handle the way that it's being expressed and told, and able to make sure that all of that remains in compliance. And so there's not as much having to work backwards with the small business grant program as there will have been with the nonprofit program. So it definitely will not take a year. I can guarantee you that. I can tell you for sure the small businesses will have, but it'll be within 6 months. That's for sure, but I don't have a solid date for you.
Rebecca, do you happen to have any updates on the administration-led projects? So there was money allocated for like a tiny home village, or shipping container pilot, other things. We haven't heard anything about these projects in a while.
Yeah, so we've met with city directors on this last week and the week before. We've connected and discussed what needs to happen going forward, what's pausing things, what's missing on some things. I can tell you that the Parks and Recs, we've pretty much categorized anything that has to do with like Parks and Recs in an expenditure category manner. We've categorized those together. We'll be handling those kind of like as a group. And then otherwise so forth. With the tiny homes, we do have some updates. We're looking into whether or not we're able to both conduct a study and provide demonstrative aspects of the tiny homes. So I'm working with the director on that. We're kind of similar to the AUDs and kind of looking into some other aspects of strategy for that.
Mr. President,
Yeah, please.
just an update on the shipping containers. Right now, they've requested that I give them some specific information in terms of planning, in terms of some of the sizes and budgets. So we're breaking that down and take a look at that. So the administration reached out and did request some additional information on what that might look like just for the shipping containers.
Good.
So I just want to get an update on it.
Yeah, I think that it's really good that you've had conversations with them. I think that it would be really helpful for council to know the status of each of those. So it's good to get bits and pieces of information here and there, but just to have a holistic understanding. It's really important that we have confidence that we're going to be able to do these things. And so not hearing any updates is definitely concerning to me. Do you?
And just so you know, Priam did tell us that we were going to get email updates that kind of like what Councilman Petrus is talking about, and we haven't gotten any yet.
How often were these email updates? Were they weekly, bi-weekly?
Weekly, yeah, weekly.
Weekly, did you set a day for them? Sorry.
No, but I can tell you that
Okay.
when I was told that was about 3 weeks ago that we would be getting the weekly update. So maybe.
Okay, so what I can do going forward is I can provide weekly updates every Friday, end of day. And the reason I say Friday, end of day is because it gives me the opportunity to go through the week and really provide a holistic update after having met with everybody. So I can provide one end of day Friday, which means most likely most of you won't see it till first thing Monday because I'll be sending it end of day Friday. So if that's okay,
Yeah, that works.
I have no problem with that every week.
Just to follow up, we also had, this is kind of a follow-up on Councilman Petrus's asking about the administrative-driven, the non-nonprofit stuff. Okay, the not nonprofit stuff. Like we had a community investment fund and exterior home repair program. Any status on those, let's say on Friday would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I guess a lot of times, please, here's the other thing I want to kind of make you aware of. A lot of these are going to, a lot of the update is conversations before any action. Because a lot of this is figuring out expenditure category, federal compliance. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Uniform Code. It's what U.S. Treasury uses to determine basically the regulations around all federal audits, which is involved when you're using any federal dollars. It's 27 CFR 200. I'm pretty sure Kristen will know that. But so it's a huge document that we have to use in tangent with the final rule as we're developing these projects to make sure that one, we have a good expenditure category, and two, we have it in the best expenditure category, and two, that we are in compliance with the Uniform Code as well, or the Uniform Guidance as well. And so a lot of this is discussions back and forth because there are options, right? There's no straight way to do this. There's different options, different paths, and you really have to be strategic in choosing the path you choose. So the update may be, hey, we met, we're still waiting to make this one decision. That just could be an update. It's kind of part of the process on how these things go. So I want to kind of prepare you for that as well, but it will be up there. It will be included for sure.
Councilman Posh?
Thank you, President. My name is Jim Posh. I'm a newly appointed council person here, so I'm the newbie in the room. So the question, well, maybe not. I don't want anybody to sort of like recap things that have already happened. But it seems to me when a project gets run and when you look for updates, there is some kind of master schedule. And I'm concerned that we have, 6 months, maybe a little bit more than 6 months, that's the collective we, to get these funds encumbered. So we're not at a risk of losing these funds. My concern is just sort of on a very, very high level, what is the risk of us losing these funds? I mean, is all this work gonna get done in time? And when I hear that there's like no schedule, like the small business piece, that's a little worrisome for me. I mean, there's gotta be some date out there that someone is working toward. And I know, hearing today that process is simpler than working with the nonprofits is somewhat comforting, but still a little alarming that there's no master schedule. I don't necessarily would want to see a full set of updates, but how are we working on the schedule? And is everything going to get done? And is everything and what do you need us for time-wise?
So I do want to clarify, we do have a schedule. It's an internal schedule. I don't have a schedule to share with you on what day the nonprofit grant application is going to go live. I don't have that date because that's not a date I can have right now. We do have a schedule. We have an internal schedule. We have a project plan. We have all of those things. Those are for us and for our milestones to know. One of the things on that is a milestone of deciding when it goes live, right? So that is a milestone on our project plan and in our schedule. That is not something that we would share publicly. I could check with my project manager and check with my team, maybe see if it's something we could share. It is technically client information, so like it's client focused, being that the administration is our client. I would also have to check with them, but that's not what I was asked originally. So I want to be very clear, council member, there is a schedule for these projects. And yes, that schedule is around getting them completed in time.
Okay.
So that's not an issue or a concern. Yeah.
Go ahead, Councilman Posh.
So, I mean, it's not, we have no right to be in the weeds, okay? We don't need the detailed schedule, but I think what would be helpful is we plan on having this milestone. I mean, milestones are sort of like really large deliverables. We don't need to see all the little things, but it's like, for example, we expect to have, maybe the application's available to the public in the month of August without any kind of dates. But some big picture estimates on what we can expect, because we do know small businesses. I mean, we are the liaisons to the community. I mean, we know these small businesses, and we're going to work with our small businesses to try to get them to file the application. So having some rough ideas of when to expect, I think that's realistic.
And if I could just add to that, where we do come in, or where we could come in, or city council could come in, is if there was something that didn't work out, it would be incumbent on us to reallocate, make a decision on, and that's part of the reason why maybe we have a little, anxiety about it.
Absolutely. First, I wanted to say yes. We are well aware that we do have to, this is a group project. We can't do this siloed. Part of the reason why we were kind of so combobulated with the first one is we were working in silos. So I recognize that, because it takes all of us. But I want to be very specific. Please, as city council members, do not work directly with any entity applying for your city grant programs. Do not work directly with them to apply for the application or apply for the grant. If they have questions, if they have issues, have them contact the city or us, but do not, and this is for federal purposes, we want to make sure that there is no perception of backdoor privileges. There's no perception of bias. These are things that the federal government's going to be looking at. And so please do not If you want to market it and send a message out that, hey, it's available, that's great. We will definitely provide you with the material that the city, once we approve it with the city and all that, we'll provide you with the material to share with your networks, to let them know how to contact or how to reach the application and fill it out. But please do not work directly with them to do it. I want to really emphasize that.
All right, stay in your lane. Go ahead, Councilman Cobb.
So you mentioned earlier a client, and in this case, did you consider the city administration to be the client and not the city or city council?
It depends on who you're asking. So our legal client, legally, our client is with the city administration. That's what our contract
The
states.
city of Cleveland.
If you're asking about who the project that we are hired to manage serves, I would say it serves the city, city council, city residents as a whole,
Right.
which is why I was excited to do it.
And I understand at this point, the ship has sailed on this process and where we are. But when I think of hiring a consultant to help us, it would have been helpful if this council had been advised early on in this process about the types of applications that we needed to have these nonprofits and entities submit to us. It would have saved a lot of time rather than going off of what they sent to us and then was sent to you guys, and then you all had to gather additional information that we didn't know to ask for. That's,
Yeah,
to me,
so
that's
I've
the
been on
most
this
frustrating thing about where we're at right now.
So I've been on this project from the beginning. It started, I don't know if any of you remember, President Kuda, you should remember how it started. It came from the Ohio Mayor's Alliance organization or conference, if you will. And essentially, originally Guidehouse was part of a network that was assisting the Ohio Mayor's Alliance with their ARPA funds and with ARPA fund guidance and advice. Originally, Guidehouse was our contract is simply advisory. The amount that we are in the weeds was not what we were originally hired on for. It's something that we have kind of expanded a bit because originally it was advisory. It was a small contract. It was a small agreement. And I remember originally when we did start, we were very engaging with all parties. I think there were some people who were just a little more hesitant to utilize our resources than others. I think I know there were some city council members that did contact me and I did speak with, that I saw at the engagements, that did have questions directly. We shared numbers. I did presentations. So, I mean, I believe that we made ourselves readily available for those who want to utilize it. I think what you're probably seeing is the results of something more internally than externally. Because I know we were available. I know that we were not advised by anyone not to be available to council. Like that was not a thing. We were. I believe I gave Council President Kuda my cell phone number, the first time I met him. So we were readily available. So whatever we weren't utilized for by City Council, I would say would probably be a discussion for City Council.
You know what, we're gonna have to wrap this up, so next.
So our contract, the master services agreement, says that the agreement is between the city of Cleveland Heights and Guidehouse. So just for clarification, it's with the city of Cleveland Heights. Also in that agreement, it references a statement of work in Exhibit C. The document doesn't seem to have an Exhibit C. So I guess if either Guidehouse or the law department is aware of a statement of work, I think that it would be really helpful for us to see it. I would like to reiterate what I think is really important, that we have, even if it's at a high level, an overview of what's going to happen so that we can set expectations for council members, for nonprofits, for other stakeholders. The nonprofits constantly talk about not having any idea what's going on and feeling like we're just meandering around. And I, as a council member, feel like that's true as well. So I think that it's really good that Guidehouse has a detailed schedule. I am really grateful that we are going to get those updates, but I think that it's also important that we're able to set expectations. Finally, Priam noted that the hours in the contract, she expected them to be used up by June. So is there any update on a potential renewal?
Not as of yet. I believe that we are in conversations, but I wouldn't say there's an update as to a decision made. I don't think there's been any concrete discussion. I don't think there's been any one-on-one with the city. I think it's just been mentioned. And we're looking to schedule that concrete meeting in the near future.
Rebecca, thank you so much for making yourself available tonight.
Yeah, no, anytime.
And
thank you.
We look forward to your Friday little, whatever you
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, maybe I'll have some little Cleveland Heights tidbits in there and stuff.
Yeah. And say hello to your parents.
Appreciate it. I will. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Good.
Okay, we're gonna move on to executive session here. Mr. Cobb, would you like to read us?
Let me slow down real quick.
Or is that, did I
I got it.
I didn't,
Got it.
yeah, sorry, I ambushed you there. Sorry.
I move to I move to go into executive session A, to consider the terms of sale or lease of city-owned real property, and B, to consider confidential information related to the marketing plans and specific business strategy of an applicant that is directly related to the request for economic development assistance under CRC section 3735.67 to .70 or 5709.40.42, or that involves public infrastructure improvements directly related to an economic development.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Eddie, go ahead and call the roll.
Cobb.
Aye.
Kuda.
Aye.
Petrus.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
Posh.
Aye.
There's
Okay, welcome back. We are out of executive session and we're gonna move on to legislative review. So I will just go through from the top. So 097, an ordinance to amend certain subparagraphs of ordinance 198 relating to appropriations and other expenditures for the fiscal year, to repeal the prior version of ordinance number 198 and declaring this. And this is for first reading for adoption tonight. Did anybody have any questions about that? Yes.
Thank you, President.
Yes.
I was just curious if we can somehow see the details of the expenditure that's being transferred for pathways and signage for the Compton Greenway. If we could get details on that $200,000+ that's going towards that greenway, part of ARPA.
I can address, actually, if you give me that, I can just show you visually what it is. So the Compton Greenway, as you remember, is from Euclid Heights Boulevard down to Berkeley Road, and then we own a vacant lot conveniently directly in front of South Compton. So the proposal was to make that vacant lot into a park trailway, and then you could be able to continue down South Compton to Kane Park. So along the Compton Boulevard, from Euclid Heights Boulevard to Berkeley, there's 5 mini roundabouts that would be installed that will both calm traffic, enable pedestrians and bicyclists to better navigate down that pathway. And then the pathway through the park would be a multi-purpose path so that a bicyclist would be able to go, but it would also have a sidewalk that comes off that multi-purpose path so that if you're walking, you can go from sidewalk to sidewalk on South Compton area. And it's a heavily landscaped park.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I didn't have a chance to print off everything, we were kind of last minute. There is going to be a piece on first reading specifically for the project, so I will have additional information for you guys. And I believe that includes the visual you're talking about,
Thanks.
potentially. If not, we can.
That's
That's if the council amends the agenda?
Correct, if council amends the agenda.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Resolution 098, proclaiming July to be National Parks and Recreation Month. These next ones are for first reading only. The first one is Turkey Ridge, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement for the sale of real property located on Edge Hill. This is first reading only, 20 townhouses that would sit on the edge of Edge Hill, the edge of Edge Hill. And we're not voting on this tonight. Anybody want to ask any questions or any comments?
I have a question.
Please.
The agenda indicates that this will be referred to planning and development for discussion before referral back to council under the normal course of order. Is that the case or no?
I did not see that.
It's just
PD,
indicated
is the
PD,
indication.
it's just indicated PD,
Oh.
that's what
Oh, I
it
see.
would go to if you were to revert it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to keep it in committee of the whole, but please weigh in, council.
Makes sense to keep it here, in my mind.
Okay.
Is there anyone who thinks it should?
Well, in lieu of that, I just want to make sure that we have a thorough discussion with these guys.
Yeah.
We don't rush through 5 minutes, that we give it as much time as we need to,
And it
given the
seems,
significance of this.
it does seem, Mr. Law Director, that we do have time, like we don't have to make a decision this month necessarily.
That's our working understanding, yes.
Okay, Councilman?
I don't have a problem with it, but I know we discussed this in the last meeting, I think doing this with another piece of legislation or so. And I think in terms of our legislative process that we agreed on, did we make room for an avenue like this so that it doesn't have to go back? Okay, just wanted to make sure for the public, okay.
We gave ourselves wiggle room.
Ordinance number 101 is the former Russo's, former Dave's. This is, if this is first reading, or again, we're not voting on it tonight. This would be, the city would be buying the parking lot for $660,000, the parking lot behind Firestone from Sal Russo. And then there would also be a $340,000 loan to Russo to supplement what Grocery Outlet would be putting into the project. Any questions, comments about that?
I just wanna say ordinance 101 is the actual loan, 107 below it is the purchase
Thank
of
you.
the parking lot.
Thank you. Those are two separate ordinances, yes.
Just to reiterate that we're asking what the funding source is, so that before we vote on it for the development agreement or the next step, that we know what the funding source is that the administration has chosen to use.
Okay. And the administration has made it clear that we do need this parking lot in our possession because there are a lot of parking challenges, let's just say, in the Cedar Fairmount neighborhood. Also on first reading, ordinance number 102. This is an ordinance amending sections 140.02, members of chapter 140, Cleveland Heights Climate and Sustainability Committee. And actually, it's the same, this is the same thing for ordinance 103. This would give council the right to appoint all 7 members of each of both the Environmental Sustainability Committee and the Transportation and Mobility Committee. Okay, Councilman?
I'd ask that we have additional discussion with this. I don't know if this is for first reading for passage, but I know we continued this discussion
Just the first reading.
last week, that we just continue this broader discussion in terms of I guess why and the optics of this is a conversation I've had with several residents in terms of the process. And I know we've had some discussion prior, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the reasons might have been because he hasn't made, the mayor hasn't made any appointments yet or any, is that the reason for this? Because if that's the case, I'm concerned for several reasons. Is we didn't give a time frame for the administration to bring those selections at all prior to doing this. And I don't know how much discussion we've had openly as a council about what's happened or what their process is, but I think before we do this, we might want to have a conversation with the administration about where they are in terms of any appointments. The other thing is I'm concerned about this because in terms of if it is just about the timing, this concerns me because council wasn't able to make at one point its own appointment. And at no point did we offer any pushback or anything different in terms of that. And so if we are, the expectation is, I guess, that certain of these selections are going to be made in a certain time frame, I think that should be discussed or written somewhere or documented so there's an understanding, because it seems like we just arbitrarily decided that it's been too long. My other concern is, and I know just from talking to the administration as well, that there were possible appointments for this. And that's my number one reason why I'm against these two pieces of legislation, is that one of the reasons that I ran for this office, and this is a conversation I had with Councilman Cobb, is to make sure that we have diversity within these boards and commissions. And it's my understanding that at least two of the people that he's had conversations with or requested that we appoint are both African Americans on these. And so I have quite a bit of concern around these two pieces of legislation. So I just ask that we have a broader conversation about this and get additional information in terms of what's happening at the administration on their side about this before moving forward with it.
Well, I have something to add to this, but I'll defer to any council people right now. Yeah, go ahead.
You and I have talked about this. You know, I'm going to be a no for a lot of the reasons that Anthony just echoed. We just passed this legislation in December. The optics of it look bad, and it looks like we're just changing it now because we can't change it. These committees have the ability to meet now, but they have 4 council members. I don't know what the mayor's position is going to be on this in terms of lending the assistance that currently is called for under the legislation as existed, and how willing the city administrator and the mayor's sustainability person are going to be to participate and lead and co-lead these committees. And we don't have the answers to that. And are we going to find ourselves right back to where we were previously, where the committee members said they couldn't go forward without some assistance and help from the administration? And so I won't go on beyond that.
I appreciate that. Go ahead.
But isn't it good government? I mean, whoever's making the appointments, that the committees are gonna have the right people to function. I mean, isn't that just sort of like what we do? It's good government.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I just want to say I want to see these committees fully staffed, and we've waited 2.5 months and we've asked repeatedly for nominations from you. So honestly, I would like to see people on that, let's say have a quorum, Councilor Cobb, but the transportation mobility people don't want to meet till they have all 7 members, because you have 4 and 1 is not there that evening, you've lost quorum.
Well, not just that, but you know, I think the committee would probably have a hard time saying, yeah, we'd like these people to be officers and so forth. It's not even a complete committee yet. I mean, you always want to organize yourselves with all the members chosen. But let me just say this. This is so far from me. This is so far from just this particular thing. This was a bad idea to begin with. This is something council has always done well and done timely, and we've reached in. I think we've been very good on diversity in particular, but in efficiency, I think this was one of these things where we were looking. It was a solution in search of a problem. I did not see what the problem was with council making these appointments. We've been, I think, great at that. I think council has a much deeper, 7. The 7 of us have a much deeper reach into the community. You know, the mayor would always be welcome to suggest people. We'd always consider that. I don't think that's, we're not foregoing that resource. If the argument is somehow that the mayor just has better judgment than our collective judgment, I certainly don't buy that. I mean, I think our collective judgment has been very good with these appointments. I think we have some things that are legitimate problems that we need to address. This was not one of them. It was just, as far as I'm concerned, was just a mistake. Yeah, go ahead.
I think operating like this now, even saying 2.5 months, I think it's just bad faith. I think if we were going to put a time limit on it, again, we should have had this discussion. I think it's unreasonable to have that expectation. Again, we don't know what the process was or how many candidates were reviewed or what the administration was looking for that. So I think to just state, well, it's been 2.5 months and they're choosing not to meet. It's not that they can't meet, but they're choosing not to meet. I just don't think is right. I think one of the reasons that we selected this process was to make sure that it was fair and it was impartial and that there was representation and selections made from both forms of government so they could come to this table. In the past, one of the reasons and one of the things that we were trying to resolve was the fact that we were placing demands on administration, but there wasn't anyone at that table or anything at that table connecting what was happening to the work in administration. Those folks were only reporting back to our council committee, and that's the problem. We were having expectations for these committees to advise council and then make decisions that we expected the administration to then go ahead and carry out. But there was no articulation, there's no collaboration at all. And so one of the things that we did through the selection process was to strengthen that. So we absolutely did solve a problem through that because it creates another layer of collaboration. But again, my expectation is if we were going to say that 2.5 months was too long, that's something that we should have stated. We can't just arbitrarily decide that we're going to put a limit on something because we personally feel that it's been too long. We don't know where that process is. Again, this council was pressured to make an appointment over and over and over again from the public. And we've seen even previous councils couldn't do that. I know there were 3 of us who were waiting to see if we would even get selected. And at no point in time did we just shift in terms of legislatively anything that we were doing. My other concern is I am fully aware that there was a request for 2 appointments. And there was, as far as I'm concerned, or what I was advised, that they were turned down, even though existing legislation says he can make those appointments. And the administration was advised no, because we plan on changing this legislation. So there's a lot of things I think that are done in bad faith. And I think from the point of this community, I think they have problems. And I'll go back to saying this again for the public. I do not think that this council has always done a great job in terms of diversity selections. I think that, in fact, we have held or extended or changed some of our tests in terms of people that we've selected for multiple things just based on how we feel about the people in some cases. But in this case, I think we have a real opportunity to show collaboration and good faith. And if we are going to change this legislation and revert it back, I think there ought to be a better reason than I just don't want to wait longer than these 2.5 months. I think that we should be more clear and open about what that time frame should be, not just for this selection process, but for any. And I strongly feel about that. So, and if we're going to give time frames for the administration for anything, where are the time frames and the buffers for this council? They have never existed. They've never been here. No matter what the council has had to face to select, no matter how much pressure from the public, we have never given ourselves this time frame for something like this and just arbitrarily decided to change this legislation. So I think if we're going to do this, I think we owe it to the public to give a very clear explanation for why we're doing this. And this is, again, this is one of those things that's extremely important for me, because it's involving and surrounding these committees. And again, diversifying them is one of my top 5 goals on this council, is making sure that those voices are heard. And I'm not sure that the people at this table have always done a great example of making sure that those voices, those diverse voices, have always been at the table. I myself have felt like an outsider at this table simply because of the culture and the background and what I bring to this table. And sometimes it's very difficult to articulate where I am on an issue. So I don't have a huge amount of trust at this table that people are going to understand diverse points of views all the time. But I think it's a bad move to decide that we're as a council going to take this back over, but still have expectation that there's going to be a level of collaboration, communication, and trust with the administration at this point. 2.5 months, I don't think is a reason. I think if there was some emergency or they could not meet, I think then there may be a reason. But we're not at a point where this is an emergency at all. I think we're at a point where now we have enough votes where we can do what many of our council colleagues wanted to do in the first place. So we're going wanna start bringing things back. And I don't think I just think it's wrong. It's not right. It's not right.
Okay, I actually gave several other reasons as well, and again, go ahead, we gotta wrap this up.
Just real quick, so two things to note. So earlier this year, with regard to these two committees, Councilwoman Larson put the word out about the availabilities. She did it multiple times. We got a flood of really high-quality applicants, and we quickly filled those seats. There wasn't one council member who was opposed to any of the people who we appointed to them. Secondly, it's not just these committees that I'm concerned about. There's also the Community Investment Corporation, there's the Arts Commission. Those groups had legislation passed at the end of the year, and 6 months has passed without a single person being appointed to either of those. So this is not something just limited to just these. It's something that concerns me more generally.
Go ahead.
I'm very happy that you're on this council, because you do bring a voice that I don't have, and I appreciate that. I just want to say that. I am concerned because I know people on these committees. They're frustrated and they're angry. They feel like they're not being heard. And I could echo this in multiple facets. We need to make sure that the people that are helping us feel like they're engaged. And I just kind of look at this as a good government. What has been working, or what was in place that I think is being looked at to replace, wasn't working. We need to find out, we need to find a path to make it work. And yes, making sure that we get diversity in these committees. And that's, you have a voice in that. And I'm gonna respect that voice, just saying.
And we've had I think a real good track record over the last 2.5 years with getting right on these committee vacancies. Addie's been a big help with that. Councilman Cobb has worked very well with getting the applicants screened and in administrative services. It works. I think that whoever council puts on a committee our voice is from the community. So to say that, the mayor's gonna get people that, back the administration's agenda, well, the agenda should be, well, that was said by.
I didn't say that at all. So if that's what you're going to be very careful what you say that I said.
That's what I thought I heard, that you said, well, here's what you said, I think. You said that there are people on the committee that aren't on the same page with the administration.
That's not what I said either.
Okay, go ahead and then repeat what you said.
What I said
about that
is
particular
an expectation that these committees who were selected by the council with no relationship to the administration at all, no connection to them, is expected to take those recommendations that we're advising council and do something in terms of administration with them. We have a gap. Pretty much, you're creating committees where you've appointed them, and they're returning their information to the council, but we're expecting administration to act on them. But there is no collaboration, no communication, no stopgap, nothing at all that's engaging administration with those same committees.
I understand what you're saying.
So I stated that the reason that we passed that legislation is because those selections allow both of us to come together, and it creates that more cohesive collaboration, is what I was stating.
Okay, I understand that. The thing is that the people that we've appointed are, I think, completely, I've never heard anybody say, I want this person on this committee so they can do this work that we're pushing. I think we've been completely devoid of any kind of bias like that. And it's gotta be short because we're right up against 7:30.
Well, I do hope that we will at least give me a little bit of time, because I think that there's been a lot of conversation about this that I have not been a part of. I was able to take a look at a previous committee meeting where I think you may have asked, has anybody asked what's taking the mayor so long? And I think maybe you responded something along the lines of, well, you and I have had, and we've had a couple conversations about this, and I can provide the explanation that I gave you. But I think the explanation that you provided based on those conversations was that I couldn't find people. Right. And it was a bit more complex than that. And so I want to express to you that from my perspective, there have been a couple occasions where in meetings that we've had, it's been expressed to me that there's a desire to know sort of where I am in the appointment process and what's going on with that. And I've explained that I'm trying to do something new here. And what I'm trying to do is recognize that 7 members aside, and I'll get to sort of whether or not the judgment of 7 people or 8 people is more expansive. But the 7-member body selecting people from a group of applicants can be and has been useful to some degree. But in this case, one thing I've found is that often, not all the time, but often, what we find is a select number of self-selected individuals who repeatedly give of themselves. And I'm not discounting their service to the community, but what I am trying to do in this circumstance, and this is something that I explained to the council president, what I am trying to do is find those people who are eminently qualified, who are working possibly professionally in the field that we're like looking for expertise in, who are doing things regionally or at a statewide level or even nationally, but haven't done things in their home. And so, you know, one individual that I was courting, basically trying to recruit this level of individual to serve on our boards and committees, because a lot of people are easy to recruit. They're retirees, they are I wouldn't say hobbyists, but they're not professionals in the field, and they've got time. And not just time to serve, because most people have time to serve, it's just time to make sure that they can make the shift. They need more time sometimes because they need to confer with their legal representation at their firm or the agency that they represent. They may need to check on conflicts of interest, and so these things take time. I had a meeting with Councilman Posh as well where I sort of explained some of this too, and there was one person in particular that needed to get legal authorization in order to be able to serve. This was specifically on the climate committee. And I did not get, and it was unfortunate news, I did not get confirmation about that until the very end of May. I was holding out hope that this stellar candidate who would provide us with connections in ways that we have not heretofore had would be able to serve. Unfortunately, that did not work. However, I did find several different diverse candidates. And I'll tell you this, I'm not looking for tokens. I'm looking for highly qualified professional people who have experience in the field, who are doing the work right now, who live here but don't do that work here. And the people I found, and I did, on Tuesday, I sent to all of council 4 appointments, 3 to the Climate and Sustainability Committee and 1 to the Transportation and Mobility Committee. I was very excited about these appointments. It would be the first Black man that we would be placing on the Climate Committee. He is extremely qualified. Mr. Terry is the state director for the Trust for Public Land. He would be a really wonderful pick. Dr. Irfan is a PhD from CASE, has done climate studies, emission studies for, I believe, the World Bank. These people have done things, you know, at a level it would be extremely beneficial. It would be our first Asian man that we would be appointing to this committee. I've been looking for highly qualified, diverse candidates. That is what's taking me so long. Now, I completely understand. I'll tell you, I sent that email out, and the response that I received was, Mayor, I will not be putting any of your appointments on the June 17th agenda. We will be voting on Gail Larson's legislation to return all council appointments to the Transportation and Sustainability Committees back to City Council. Now, I don't, that's not the point of what I'm saying in this moment.
Okay.
My point is, I read that and I felt like this council woke up and chose violence. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. And the reason, like, I could completely understand it if you had an indication that I was hostile to the creation of these committees or that I was deliberately delaying these committees. I could understand, and please just allow me to finish. I'm not saying that that's what you believe. I'm saying I could understand the impetus for reverting those back to council if that's what you believed about my motivation. But nobody asked me. Well, at least I would say this, Counselor, as the introducing sponsor, you and I have not had a conversation about this. I am a phone call away. I've said that repeatedly. And I will, before I get there, I contacted these people and let them know that I would be putting their names forward. And I let them know that this council would be considering them because it was my expectation that as the mayor, I would be able to put forth legislation and have it considered fairly and in good faith by the council. That was my expectation. I believe that this legislation, which was actually unanimously passed in January, under this current council, unanimously passed in January, and the appointments, it took, 3 months for council to finally appoint in April. And so I recognize that it has taken a bit longer, and this is something new. It's a new experiment. I thought it was an experiment in collaboration. I had high hopes for what this would result in and the message that it would send us about how we can work together. I believe that this is a step backwards, and it worries me. And I'll say this, I brought those pieces of legislation with me today, and I have an ask of this council. I would ask a member of this council to move and another member of this council to second the addition of these resolutions to council's agenda tonight for a first reading, so that if your intention is to fill these as quickly as possible, we've got really fantastic candidates for council to publicly vet right now. This is a possibility. This is us working together. Like I said, I had high hopes, not necessarily, a complete expectation of how this was gonna go. But I had high hopes and I was operating in good faith. Now, I will say this, as we continue to do this, and I hope that council decides to reverse course on these two particular pieces of legislation. And if we do, and we continue to move forward with this experiment, I want to confirm for you and I want to commit to you that I will do my level best to do this faster and more efficiently and more effectively and provide these appointments to council expeditiously. But I will say this, one last thing. I know that we've got a time frame, but there are certain things that I think need to be said because I haven't sort of had the opportunity.
But here's the thing, we're gonna, this is a first reading and we can
It's a
have,
first reading.
we can have more talk about it later,
There's one last piece that I'd like to leave the council with.
please.
And that is the fact that I recognize that, the administration isn't going to be perfect. The council isn't going to be perfect. I will say this though. I am not calling as a result of a delay in appointments for the boards that council has failed to appoint to, let's say for the last 2.5 years. The Fair Practices Board, for instance. I'm not calling for some change because council has failed in its duty to appoint to a Fair Practices Board. What I'm saying is, let's have some patience with each other as we work through this collaborative effort. I was hoping that these two important boards would be something that we could birth together, something that we could co-create, something that we could both, have shared responsibility to in a way that is in line with the collaboration that I thought that we were embarking on in this new term.
I appreciate that. I wanna say a couple of things and then I'll call on Councilman Petrus and we gotta move on. First of all, we have not met in 4 weeks. Okay, you and I have not met in 4 weeks. We've not had council leadership meetings. A lot of these things probably would have been well discussed there. Secondly, phone calls, we've had a couple of phone calls, but we have not had our regular leadership meetings on Tuesday at noon for 4 weeks. Secondly, in that email I sent you, the tagline that you didn't want to read, which was simply, it's material to me because it absolutely is the truth. That's why it means something to me, because it's the truth. And the truth is that I'm perfectly willing to look at any and all of your recommendations, as I would think the whole council would be. And I don't think there's any question about that. And I forgot what I was going to say lastly, but it's I never thought this was a good policy to begin with, and I think I made that clear to you both.
Voted for it.
Both publicly and privately. Go ahead, Councilman, and then we're going to move on.
Mr. Mayor, I pledge to you that if those were to make it onto the agenda, I would vote for them. But again, I have concerns more generally about the appointment process. I am glad to hear that you want to be collaborative, but it's hard for me to reconcile that with earlier this year asking about the CIC, asking when those appointments would be made, and you told me that you weren't sure. I asked this spring, next 6 months, next 12 months, you said you weren't sure. And more recently, I requested that the administration come to our housing meeting on the 25th and provide an update, and that request was declined. So it's hard for me to reconcile this, what I'm hearing from you, and I do take you at your word that you are being sincere and wanting to collaborate.
Thank you.
But I think that it's important that we get going with this and that we don't let the business of this city continue to be hobbled.
All right, well, thank you, Councilman, I appreciate that. Resolution number 105.
104 and 5.
104, thank you, yeah, is a resolution appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections relative to the estimated assessments for a portion of the expense of street lighting. And 105 is a resolution appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections relative to the estimated assessments for a portion of the expense of improvement of streets and parkways. So that's an et cetera. Any comments, questions about that? Yeah, please.
I'm just curious, have we had people that have already filed complaints or concerns about the assessment rate?
Not that I've been made aware of.
So this would be another normal process that we would need to have that board in place, should you receive any.
That's correct.
Thank you.
By statute, if they're-
Resolution number 106, a resolution allocating $7,500 to Future Heights for by the City Council. This is again first reading, to serve as a co-sponsor of the Music Hop. The reason I asked for $2,500 more than last year was because it's being expanded to Cedar Fairmont and they're expanding another night. So I thought, give them less because it's a smaller, area. I'm talking about Cedar Fairmont, but I'm pleased that they're doing the Music Hop and so forth. Yes.
I would ask that you add additional council members to that legislation as sponsors.
Absolutely.
Everyone?
That
Okay with that?
are in favor of
So
it.
Awesome.
are you still chairing that? The Music Hop, are you still connected to that?
No, I'm not sharing it.
Okay.
Councilwoman? I'm sorry. Okay.
Quick here before you move on. This is where on first readings only we would get to 108, 2024, which is the Compton Greenway. So I will pass this out.
Oh, right.
It's first reading only, so
And we have to
take
do
one
that
out and
at
pass it
the,
around. Yeah, we do have to make an
on the
amendment to the
agenda.
agenda.
Okay.
That's correct. There's also an additional piece that will be for the ARPA contracts for first reading only, which would be 109, 2024.
Yeah.
Which I don't have yet. I will get them to you, but that should also be added to the
096 is the.
First reading only though,
first
right?
reading only, correct?
Who's going to add this?
If you want to.
Thank you. 096 is adoption of the 2025 tax budget, which we've spoken about before. Is that second reading? That's a
Yes.
second reading.
Yep.
And then on fourth reading, we have Dora. This is the designated outdoor refreshment area. Mr. Law Director, when do we have to have this passed by? I know we could not vote on it until today.
Correct.
I know that was the front end. What's the back end?
Give me a moment
I'll give you a moment.
and I can let you know
I
before.
suppose I could have emailed you if I'd
That would have been awesome. But I will provide you with a response prior to
I
consideration
appreciate
in
that.
the other room.
And I just want to know, do we have, there was talk at the last meeting, we had the chief of police here, about looking at a safety plan. Do we have anything to look at?
My expectation is that he would provide it as soon as it was ready. I have not been on to this point, but I'll check in with him.
Okay. I have several, several things I'd like to see, as far as crosswalk safety, patrolling, possibly speed bumps. Anybody else? I don't wanna.
I'd just like to reiterate, I'd really like to see a safety plan because we had 2 people die in the last year. And the safety of everybody on that street needs to be considered, so I'd like to see a safety plan.
I mean, just with more people, and I'm not even talking about the drinking, but just with more people, I've just had too many business owners tell me that they look out their windows sometimes and they see people crossing in the crosswalks and it looks, I see all these near misses and so forth. So I would like to put off voting on this until we see a safety plan in place, but I'll certainly hear what anybody else has to say.
I'd just like to note that we have received a decent number of emails about this, and a lot of people have raised concerns about pedestrian and cyclist safety. I share those concerns. Most of us know that if you stand on that road for any period of time, there's a good chance that you're going to see something unsafe. And so I am not saying that I will, motion to delay this legislation or anything like that. But I do think that separate and in addition to this, we need to act now on improving the pedestrian and cyclist safety of that area. As Gail noted, a couple people unfortunately were struck and killed. The circumstances were different. But standing on that street, we all know that people drive way too fast on that street. In Akron, really happy to see that they're laying down a ton of speed tables. In fact, in the local news, when residents were asked, what do you like about this or what do you wish were different, people said, I just wish there were more. In the city of Cleveland, they just started laying down the first of what'll be 100 speed tables. And I think that we need to act now to slow traffic on that street. And I would even be willing, we have $285,000 of ARPA funds that are unallocated, not sure which buckets those would have to go into, but if it's possible, I would even be willing to gladly allocate more funds in excess of what has already been allocated for pedestrian safety to make that a reality.
So where are we on holding off the vote, Dora, until we see a safety plan? I support holding off, obviously.
When does the door actually go in effect?
That depends on.
Find out.
So I have a question in that regard, which is for the clerk, which is for the date of initial publication of the notice of hearing.
Oh, I told that to Lori. Give me 1 second, I can find that. We can confirm.
Because the statutory period, and thank you to Councilman Cobb for pointing to that quickly, is not less than 30 days nor more than 60 days after that date of initial publication of notice, which came up in a prior discussion with regard to whether you could act at the last meeting.
So we have to figure out where we're at based on this date that she's looking up.
You certainly would have some more time based on the fact that this was the first meeting that you could act. But we can calculate the exact date with that.
Has it been published?
Actually,
Yeah.
just as an aside, if you permit me. So I am looking at a safety plan that apparently was not. I thought that it was going to be transmitted directly to council, and it was not. So I will forward this on to council. I don't expect you to be able to take a look at it tonight. So if there's room to hold off until council feels some sort of satisfaction, then that is the way that it needs to be.
May 10th.
May 10th, so roughly July 10th.
Okay. So, for sure we could do this
Next week.
next week, right?
Yeah.
Which
And then to
everybody
answer,
knows we have a council meeting scheduled for the 24th.
to answer your question, after we approve it, it goes down to the Ohio Department of Liquor Control. And it's my understanding that they are acting on these within 30 days.
I don't have the ability to confirm or argue with that.
I took that from a memo that I saw another law director sent to city council that had done a DORA.
Great.
That was my source. I think it was the city of Oxford.
Go ahead, Council.
This was separate from Dora. I don't know if we were finished with that and moved.
I was gonna say one more thing about Dora.
Okay.
And then go ahead. I would also like the 6 of us and eventually 7 of us to think about whether we might wanna narrow down for the first year the DORA to not be, 7 days a week, 6 months a year, but maybe do something that's a little more manageable to start out. Maybe try 5 or 6 events, or maybe even just weekends. I mean, at least, I'm just throwing this out there to think about it. And that way we can kind of acclimate ourselves to this, both from a safety perspective and just, the kind of unexpected things that happen when you try something new. Go ahead, Councilman. So, or is this Dora?
DORA.
Okay, yeah.
I think we may need to put that in legislation if we're gonna change those
Oh, of
restrictions.
course, yeah.
So we would need to do that in advance of our
Right.
next meeting.
I mean,
We're gonna vote.
I don't have a specific proposal right now, but it's something I started to think about over the weekend. I'm just sharing it publicly with, you and everybody else.
I'd be willing to get together with you and we could talk about that and maybe work on getting something to the law director.
Yeah, as an alternative, and then we have both, go ahead,
So first
we're
thing.
still on the Dora.
Yeah, first thing is that I would caution against being overly restrictive in that way. And the reason why, we all recognize that any change like this, it comes with some degree of risk. I'll say having establishments that serve alcohol in our community at all comes with some degree of risk. We've done quite a bit of research into the DORAs that exist in our state. We've had conversation with North Canton, I believe, Kent, and some other communities, all of whom have DORAs on a main street like the one that we're contemplating here. And Kent, for instance, potentially is even more risk given the college student population in that jurisdiction. And overwhelmingly, the response and report from those communities has been positive. Now, that's not to say that we won't be taking a risk. But I think that, shifting mid-course like this may feel safer because it feels like a half measure. I'm not sure that it actually does decrease the risk all that much, but I would caution against taking that route just to sort of say, well, it's not so many days, so statistically, I guess the risk is less, but I'm not sure that it really works that way with this particular circumstance. And I also, that was one point, but I also saw that AD Anderson had a perspective that he might like to share if the chair allows.
I guess I would just comment, if you are going to consider any changes, you talk to some of the businesses in the district. I think they had certainly landed on the days and hours they thought were most beneficial and appropriate. So I would certainly think about that before going down the road of adding anything additional. I think overall, there's 120 plus DORAs in the state now. And the prevalence of any problems that have occurred from those DORAs is almost non-existent statewide. And I just feel like I know the business district is very much in favor and supportive of it. And I understand the concerns involving alcohol. I think any of the problems that can come from alcohol probably don't have anything to do with the DORA though. Any of the things that could happen that are unfortunate with alcohol can or would happen with or without the presence of a DORA for the most part. And I don't think from the communities that we've talked to that have Main Street DORAs similar to ours, I mean, this isn't a party atmosphere. This is, just an additional reason, way for people to be able to spend more time, spending both time and money in their business district. So certainly do respect, the need for safety, but I know the business district is very much, looking forward to it. And they've also done their research too, and they understand the very, very minimal risk that has come with DORAs in comparable communities.
No, you're welcome. And we all want to support the business district. Councilman Maddox, if you could.
I just saw your hand, so I wasn't sure.
Just fidgeting probably.
I just want to discuss the best way to go about this because I wanted to make a motion to add the mayor's 4 resolutions for those appointments to the agenda for first reading. So number one, the public can take a look at them and we could have future discussion about them. I didn't know if that was something that we wanted to talk about now or if we wanted to wait until the next meeting, but I absolutely would like to make a motion to add those to.
I mean, I'd be glad to talk about it at the next meeting, but
Is that something you would consider being discussed at my scheduled Administrative Services Committee meeting next week?
Sure.
Mayor, if you would be available to come in and talk to us
What is the time?
next Monday?
Yeah, Monday at 4, so it'd be right before the council meeting
Are
committee.
you available also?
To attend, yes.
I am not completely certain about my in-person availability. If I cannot be there in person, then I will do my best to be there virtually, if that's useful.
It might be useful if we could discuss the whole appointment snafu, not snafu, but the issues that we're having. So we're not in a rush conversation about it, give you more of an opportunity to talk to us.
I would like to have a greater opportunity to discuss this issue with the council. And I will say, I would appreciate, and I've said this repeatedly and I'll say it again, in a circumstance like this one, where you have an urgent need, please call me, please text me, tell me that if this is something urgent that you would like a resolution to, and you and I can talk directly. I know that you and I had that conversation, but I can't say that just talking to one council member, council president or not, really transmits the message to the rest of council. So perhaps you and I should talk more frequently.
There is one point of procedure I know, but normally we talk about our nominations of appointees in an executive session.
And that's another thing that sort of the blended circumstance was intended to address. I know that council goes into executive session, much of the deliberation around these people's qualifications happens in secret. Now, my expectation from the outset was always that, similar to other jurisdictions, I would make an appointment. Council, I would expect, would vet that appointment with rigor. And part of that vetting tends to be bringing people in, and I confirmed this with my appointees that I sent over to council. I confirmed that they would be available and willing and happy to have a conversation with council in public in a confirmation hearing to discuss, and I specifically outlined to discuss their qualifications, their desire to help the community, and what they bring to the table on these boards. And I expect to be there as well to provide council with insight as to why I selected those people. That was my expectation. That's my general expectation for appointments. And so I know, because it has to pass muster with a rigorous vetting process from council, I have to be very, very careful about who I'm going to put in the hot seat in front of council.
Appreciate
One
that.
more thing, and I would like to see their applications.
Yep, that
We have
was
not seen them.
my expectation was to provide that. I know one of them, maybe two you have, but my expectation was sort of adjusted a bit once I got the email telling me that there was a refusal to place my legislation on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Mr. President, you didn't
We're
answer.
gonna have to,
I didn't get answer the question part. So is the expectation that we're adding these to tonight's agenda to go into?
I was saying you could bring this up at the next, we're not voting on this tonight, so you could bring it up.
But yeah, I just didn't know because it can't be referred to committee if it's not. So I didn't know, are we gonna place it on it so it could be referred to him eventually or?
That's my request. My request is that council amend it to refer to administrative service.
So we've gotta add them to this and do a reading on it then. All four.
That is the request that I've made to council.
You have a standing item on your agenda for amendments to the agenda, which is done by motion.
Yeah.
Motion would need to be seconded and approved by a majority of the council.
Thank you.
Are we doing something?
The next meeting.
Okay, all right, this meeting is adjourned at 8:04 and